Hey everyone! Today's DIY and hair idea was inspired by the character Eleanor Guthrie from the show Black Sails. It's in its last season, so I thought what better way to celebrate this particular TV heroine than by recreating her braids, necklace, earrings, and comb. I'm going to start with the hair accessory. I'm using a plain comb, some silver tone craft wire in 28 gauge, and I've got some Venetian glass beads for the centerpiece. And I'm also using a handful of freshwater pearls in light pink and off-white. In addition to that, I've got a nylon jaw pliers and a set of wire cutters on hand. I began my project by unspooling about 30 inches of the wire, and I used the nylon jaw pliers to straighten out any and all kinks. Once I'd cut the piece that I needed, I folded it evenly in half and placed the bend between the teeth of the comb in the very center. To anchor it into place, I simply wrapped each end around the comb twice. Now that I'm really ready to begin with my design, I started with the largest bead, my Venetian glass. Both ends were passed through the opening before I wrapped them around and through the teeth, which essentially fastened it into place. The two wire ends are on the right side, and for now I'm putting all my attention into this half. Next came the freshwater pearls. I put the first one onto the top wire, wrapped it around, and then put the next one on the wire on the bottom half before fixing that about the comb too. You can see that this is just a continued rotation between both pieces, during which each one is used separately from the other, and that's what helps to keep the pattern from looking too prearranged and just a little bit more organic. When I got to the end, I decided to use smaller glass pearls, and this was because I thought it might look cool if the size of the beads tapered outwards. I used a light tan color and an ivory. Once this side was fully covered, I simply wrapped the remaining craft wire around that last tooth. The other side was literally the same thing. Snipped off 30 inches from the spool, straightened it out, folded it in half, and wrapped it around the comb right beside the centerpiece bead. I started off with the pink and white freshwater pearls and then moved on to the small tan and ivory ones at the end, and that was it. For the necklace, I had a pair of scissors and some nylon beading thread. I also had a few sewing needles and some silver beading crimps. I'm sticking to those small ivory glass pearls from the comb project, and I'm also reusing some of those off-white freshwater pearls. But this time my centerpiece is a green dragonfly. I couldn't find a bumblebee like Eleanor's or even a beetle, but I thought this was close enough. And I'm adding a chain nose pliers into the mix, along with some duct tape, a measuring tape, and a necklace that I already owned for reference. Once I laid out the measuring tape and put my necklace against it, I measured 18.5 inches, so I decided to just round it off. This means there's going to be 9 inches of bead on either end of my dragonfly. I don't have a proper bead clamp, so that's why I'm using the duct tape. It's important to leave some extra room on either end too, since we'll need to tie off knots at the end. My thought was that an extra 3 or 4 inches would probably give me enough space to do that. I always work from the middle out, so here I put on my bug and then I'm lacing on 3 of the freshwater pearls. They're basically just there to help me frame my focal point, but after that it's extremely straightforward and pretty simple. I decided to use a sewing needle since this helped me to string on the smaller ivory pearls pretty quickly. I think it took me a total of 5 minutes to get my first 9 inches down. Afterwards, I taped down the completed half, lifted up the other end, and repeated the exact same thing on the other side. In my opinion, the trickiest part of the necklace are the knots, and that's because you need them to be tight and flush against the bead on either end. You don't want your pearls to slide around on the string, nor do you want any gaps between beads. Personally, and this is just me, I don't feel as though it's secure until it's been tied a few times. So I doubled, tripled, and then quadrupled my square knots. Bead crimps are these extra small but important jewelry accoutrements that have an open clamp and loop. My camera didn't pick this up as well as I liked, but you basically place the knot from the end of your thread into the clamp and then use a pair of chain nose pliers to close it on top. You'll also have to close that open loop. I forgot to showcase these during the section in which I was sharing the necessary materials, but you'll need some jump rings as well. Here you can see that I'm using 2 sets of chain nose pliers to open them before putting them onto the bead crimps loop. These are pretty common in most jewelry DIYs, and they're really easy to use and not hard to find in any art store. Now, I could have put a modern necklace closure onto the jump rings, but I decided to try my hand at being as authentic to that colonial style as was possible, and so I settled on a ribbon instead. I'd chosen a soft lavender, and the first piece I cut was probably 20 inches. I didn't really measure this, instead I just gauged with my eyes, but I did use that initial piece against the second one, and that was just so I could keep the proportions even. And you can see that all I did here was pass the ribbon through the ring, make sure the ends matched up, and then it was just a simple square knot. The earrings are the least screen accurate accessory, but it couldn't be helped since I wasn't able to find the appropriate red Eleanor beads. Instead, I'm staying in theme with my dragonfly by having selected green and silver beads along with 2 small pink ones, and I'm still utilizing those tiny ivory pearls. In addition to that, I'm also using a pair of earring hooks, eye pins, and 2 head pins, as well as a set of round nose pliers. The eye hooks come first. I decided that I wanted the pink on the bottom and the green on top. Since the pins themselves are pretty long and I'm not filling up their length, I had to snip off a good portion of each so that I could make a balanced loop. The other thing too is that the cut has to be even on both, otherwise one earring may end up hanging lower or higher than the other. To make the eye, grasp the end of the wire with the tip of your round nose pliers and just curve it inwards. If you need to, use your chain nose pliers to close the loop or to straighten it out. Moving on to the dangles, I put a solitary pearl on each of my head pins. Again, I had to cut off a large amount of excess so that I could make my loop. It's the same as before with the round nose pliers, except this time you don't seal anything off until you've connected the 2 pieces. The easiest part of this are the earring hooks, which are pretty reminiscent of the jump rings from the necklace. Here I'm opening them up with my chain nose pliers, attaching my completed jewelry, and then closing them up. Finally, we arrived at the hair, and it's incredibly doable even if you're a braiding beginner. I started with a center parting just like Eleanor, and I curled all my hair off screen with a 1-inch beaded curling wand, which ironically is called the pearl. Next, I used a comb to make 2 horizontal sections that started at the crown of my head and extended to slightly behind my ears. For now, I'm claw clipping the hair in the back out of my way. I frizz a lot along my hairline, especially near the ears and along my parting, so here I'm putting a dab of light gel into these areas before brushing it all the way through. Eleanor's braids begin behind her ears, so to emulate this pattern, I've gently inserted 2 style clips just at that point, and I'm going to make a simple 3-strand right behind them. I tend to be a heavy-handed braider, so this trick is especially helpful for me when I'm trying to recreate a softer point of origin. Like always, I've used a thin clear elastic on the ends, and then I turn my attention to the other side, which of course were all the same steps. After this is completed, I pause for a moment so that I could smooth and hairspray down any frizzies or kinks at the crown. Definitely an optional step, but sometimes these smaller details really help with keeping the overall aesthetic neat. Now putting this together is just as simple as the braids were. These get pinned across the back of the head right at the nape. If my hair had been longer, I might have zigzagged them across this space more than once. However, and in this particular instance, my hair is almost the exact same length as the actress, which is definitely a pleasant change from some of the other characters I've recently tried to cosplay. Since I did have 2 little braid ends that were left over though, I simply tied them together with another elastic under my curls, and that was pretty much all there was to it. The only things left were my handmade accessories, which of course took no time at all to put on. I've always loved colonial history and dress, so while the show has been based in Nassau and centered around pirate tales rather than the 13 colonies, it's that same time period. Besides the story itself, the costuming, hair, and jewelry have continued to hold my attention, and I'm genuinely sad to see this one end. Anyway, I've officially reached the end of my video today. If you liked my ideas or have enjoyed watching Black Sails, throw me a thumbs up or leave a comment. It really helps me out when you do, and I love to read and respond to all of your messages. Thank you for watching, and until next time, have fun and keep braiding. Bye!